Today we're going to be talking about why I don't believe periodization exists in strength and conditioning and why it's important to monitor a workout program on a daily basis. Hey, how's it going everybody? Remy Sovereign here from RemySovereign.com. With today's new video, we're going to be talking about something a little bit different, and we're going to be talking about periodization, specifically your traditional Western periodization or linear periodization. So for those of you that don't know what periodization is, it's essentially just a fancy term to describe a workout program that may consist of a macro cycle, mesocycle, and microcycle. So the macro cycle would be the duration of the workout program, and it'd be used to describe it in terms of a year or two. Your mesocycle would be to describe a certain period of that program with regards to a few weeks to a few months. And the microcycle would be a specific small period that may last up to 7 days within that macro cycle. Now, I'm going to share with you guys, firstly, my personal experience with regards to working in the NBA with the Toronto Raptors and why they didn't use periodization and where I kind of learned why it doesn't exist, specifically with regards to working with them. So let's start with a few examples here. Let's take a star player that, let's say, plays 30 minutes a night or 20 minutes a night, whatever the case may be. And let's say we have a workout program that's planned for them. So let's say the first 2 weeks, we start them off at the season. It's maybe some sort of light activity that they're doing. Weeks 3 and weeks 4, we increase the load or intensity or volume. Weeks 5 to 6, now we may get into some sort of strength phase where we're further increasing the intensity, maybe reducing the volume though. The point being though is that let's say we have that workout program planned for that star player. Now, let's say week 4 comes around and all of a sudden that star player gets injured during a game. Now that the star player gets injured during the game, they won't be able to follow his program anymore because they're injured, and now they have to change their program, and now they have to go through a recovery or rehab phase. So the program that they were currently following is just kind of thrown out the window completely now because of their injury. Now, you can't really avoid that, and that could happen in any situation. But now that leads me into my next point. So now that star player gets injured during the game, all of a sudden a bench player or a player that doesn't play as many minutes may play a significant amount of minutes that night and for the duration of that star player being injured. So this is where it gets important now, is because that bench player or player that doesn't play regular minutes and is now playing a significant amount of more minutes, if we have them following a similar program, a similar 6-week kind of program that I kind of just described, typically with regards to these bench players or players that don't play regularly, we're able to sometimes, they may be able to work out more or we're able to train them more just because they're not playing those regular minutes, so they may get more practice time. However, now all of a sudden they unexpectedly play a big amount of minutes during that game, that star player gets hurt, and let's say the next day we have them programmed to do some heavy deadlifting or heavy squatting or some heavy agility or speed work. If they now all of a sudden go into that workout the next day after just playing those unexpected minutes, we actually may be causing more damage because all of a sudden they play those unexpected minutes, they have accumulated all this fatigue now, they may be tired, may get a bad night's sleep, and if we put them into that workout the next day, we may actually be putting them at a greater injury risk just because now we may be overworking the athlete and they're under recovering because they're not used to this. And this could occur throughout the duration of that star player's injury, because their minutes may be up significantly throughout the next couple weeks or couple months, depending on how long a star player is out for. And so now their whole program needs to be changed, or at least it needs to be adapted to some sort of change. We need to regress somehow and maybe cut out a lot of the workouts or change things. So the point being is now that we've followed that linear periodization, everything is not going to be linear now. Everything needs to be changed, and we may need to cut a lot of things down just so we make sure that athlete is working at an optimal level without putting themselves at a greater risk for injury. So that's the important consideration there, guys, is that a lot of things occur unexpectedly and we don't know what may happen. And when you have a program planned like that, usually things never go as planned. And we don't want to be overworking athletes or under recovering them because they're getting paid to play their sport. And for the case or example that I'm using as basketball here, they're getting paid to play basketball. They're not getting paid to work out in the weight room or getting paid to deadlift or getting paid to squat. They're getting paid to play basketball. So that's the important thing to keep in mind here. Now, while I'm using professional sports and professional athletes as examples, This can specifically apply to all other athletes and sports as well. Basketball just kind of being the example just because that's what I'm familiar with and that's where I kind of learned this from, and that's just my experience from working in the NBA with the Toronto Raptors. Now we could go a step further and apply this to your everyday or normal individual. So let's say someone that works in 8 to 4, 8 to 3 every day, and they weightlift as a hobby on the side. So let's say they may follow some sort of periodized program, a linear progression program, or any other sort of periodized program. And then let's say they're week 5 or week 6, where they're kind of gradually increasing the intensity and volume after starting at weeks 1 and 2, where everything was kind of light and more or less intense, and there was just a lower volume, but everything's now increased by week 6. So let's say they're there and all of a sudden one night they get a bad night's sleep, or they get a couple nights of bad sleep in a row, and then all of a sudden the next day or the next few days afterwards they're doing heavy deadlifting or heavy squatting. Now it may not be ideal for that athlete to go heavy, or that individual to go heavy squat or heavy deadlift, because now that we've kind of disrupted the individual's sleep, their performance may be substantially lower. They may not even feel like lifting the weight. And with regards to a linear progression, they may not even be able to lift the weight just because they feel real tired and they may be fatigued, and they just haven't got a good night's sleep, and it's really affected their performance overall. So there's one example. Now another example would be, let's say, take a similar individual now, just an everyday individual, or let's say a student, someone in university that maybe that works out on the side and just is a full-time student. Let's say all of a sudden that student has, they may have a class or two during a specific day, and those classes may be an hour and a half each. So with regards to that hour and a half each, they may be sitting for a total of 3 hours. Now you have to keep that in mind, because now if they're sitting for a total of 3 hours and then they go to work out afterwards, if they go to work out, with regards to that sitting now that they just previously did, they've already accumulated stress and some fatigue with regards to the lower back. So they've stressed their ligaments, joints, their spinal discs, muscles, just with regards to sitting for 3 hours. And now if they go heavy deadlift or squat, they may be putting themselves at maybe a greater risk for injury. So it's important to kind of be cautious, because you need to be careful with how you're approaching things. And you have to realize that doing a lot of these daily activities or tasks and then going to work out, specifically doing heavy lifts that could be dangerous like a squat or deadlift, and already accumulating some of that fatigue and stress could be putting someone at a substantial or a huge increase in risk for injury. Now, the same could be said also of someone all of a sudden unexpectedly they had a meeting, that student now has a meeting, and that could make things worse. So they had a meeting where they were sitting for a couple hours, so already on top of that 3 hours that they did for sitting with regards to their 2 classes, and now that would make things significantly worse, which they didn't plan for, that unexpected meeting. Same thing could be said if all of a sudden unexpectedly an individual plays a pickup game of basketball or hockey prior to going to work out in the gym. You're accumulating stress, you're accumulating fatigue. And as you do that, and then you go to work out, and especially if you're going heavy, that's where the thing to keep in mind is going heavy and doing kind of more of those complex, dangerous lift like a bench press, squat, or deadlift. Now the point here, guys, is that you need to constantly monitor what you're doing on a daily basis, and you have to recognize that as things unexpectedly come up, like some sort of unexpected meeting, and then you're sitting for more hours than usual, or all of a sudden now you're playing a pickup game of hockey or basketball, or all of a sudden you have a long trip that you're traveling for, maybe it's a couple hours, you got to travel somewhere. Keep in mind and take all into consideration, because that's all going to affect how you perform during your workout that day or the next few days. So that's why your workout program needs to be adept to change and needs to be constantly monitored on a daily basis in order to reduce the risk of injury and to optimize your performance. Because if we're just constantly following a program that we have written for a couple months and we follow it to its T, it may not be good for us, and it may be just doing worse. And it happens all the time. Let's say you have a personal trainer, someone works with a personal trainer at the gym. And let's say that day that personal trainer has some program designed for you. We're doing sit-ups, you're doing all this high volume, heavy stuff, weighted sit-ups or anything like that. And during that day, you may have been sitting for 4 or 5 hours watching TV or sitting at a desk. And now you go do that workout. It's not going to be good for you, and it's not going to be, it may not be good for you, and it may be actually increasing the risk of injury, specifically with regards to your lower back if you're doing those sit-ups and sitting all day. So that's the kind of the point that I want to make, guys, with regards to periodization, and we could also also just kind of monitoring your program on a daily basis. The same can be applied and said for a lower back injury. You know, an individual maybe they have their injury, the exercise may not even be prescribed to them at the beginning, and they slowly progress. Maybe at week 4, now we're starting to add in some exercise, and then maybe at week 7, all of a sudden they get a bad night's sleep, or they did some sort of activity where now they caused a flare-up, and now they aren't able to perform that exercise even though we had them progressing to do some sort of more advanced stuff during that week. Now they have to kind of regress, change their program, and adapt. So that's the point that I want to make here, guys, is that workout programs need to be kind of monitored on a daily basis, specifically with regards to athletes, regular individuals, injuries, just for everyone that is following a workout program, if they're looking to optimize performance and reduce the risk of injury. And that's why I don't believe periodization exists at all. And it's constantly kind of reinforced and always talked about with regards to the National Strength and Conditioning Association, which I don't agree with at all with regards to their teachings, with regards to that traditional linear periodization, Western periodization, because I don't think it's doing anyone really any good, because those programs need to be monitored on a daily basis in order to be effective. While it's good to plan, and it's good to plan ahead, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's bad to plan ahead. Programs, in a sense, should be planned ahead, but they need to be constantly monitored and adapt to change constantly. And so that's just kind of the final take-home point, guys. And the final tip that I want to make is, if you have a workout program that you're following, be sure to constantly monitor your body and how you feel on a daily basis. And if you maybe have all of a sudden done a number of unexpected tasks during that day, or have had a couple bad nights of sleep, then you may want to consider maybe taking it easy in the gym for a day or for a few days, especially if you plan on going heavy and doing a lot of complex lifts, or if the volume is very high or the intensity is very high. Now, if you're currently following a workout program, whether that's for training purposes or for rehabbing an injury, I would love to hear just about your workout program, and if you've had to make a number of changes to that, whether that's due to maybe a setback in your training or with regards to your injury, or maybe you've had a bad night's sleep, or some sort of activity affected your training or your injury and you just had to constantly change it and maybe had some regressions or progressions in it. Also, if this is your first time watching one of my videos, guys, and you aren't already subscribed, be sure to subscribe, as I'm always posting different performance and training tips. And with all that being said, guys, I wish you guys all the best and a successful and productive day, and take care.